Hi, I'm Ashley from Sunny Made, and today we are on week 4 of our Sunny Star quilt. Hello friends, welcome back. We're on week 4 of our Sunny Star quilt. How are things going? How are your stars coming along? Do you have any questions? Please find me either on Instagram at Ashley_SunnyMade or just leave them down in the comment section below and I will come back and answer them. So let's recap. Week 1, we did all our cutting on our fabric. We laid them out into piles. You should have decided which layer cake pieces went to where and cut them all up. Week 2, we made the center part of our star. Okay, these scrappy stars, center piece. Okay, and then week 3, we made this beauty. We did 8 at a time half square triangles and put the outer pieces onto our stars. Now that we have all 12 of our stars put together, it is now time to lay them out and make them into a quilt. This is such a fun part and super easy. So first we're going to start by laying these out. I usually use my kitchen floor. I like to look at them, just make sure that no colors too close together, and then I will sew them together in rows. A few things to think about, but I will walk you through it. Make sure that when you sew them together, one row, your seams are ironed one direction, the next row they're ironed the other way, so we can nest them beautifully. Okay? You should have 4 rows of 3 across, 4 down. Sew them together, sew the rows together, then sew the stars together in a row, and then sew the rows together. Now, once we do that, it's going to be time to put on our stop border. I like to do the top and bottom first, and then put on the side pieces. That just makes it easier, makes it nice and clean. We're going to sew all our other pieces together and create that piano border along the edge. We should have a whole bunch of fun different pieces in here that are ready for us to put together. Okay, questions so far? Hope not. This is so exciting. It's quick. It's a quick part, easy part. We're going to get it put together, and soon you will have this beautiful quilt. Welcome to my kitchen floor. What I'm going to do now is just lay out my quilt blocks. Nothing particular, no particular order. I mainly just look to make sure we don't have matching colors, or like this one, I don't want to put it this way because we have the same fabric. I turn it, there we go, you know. So I keep turning it until I like how they go together. And honestly, this is a scrappy quilt. There's lots of different fabrics in it. There's lots of different colors in it. It really does not matter how you put it together. And so we are going to put this in a let's see, a 4x3 pattern. Actually, yep, a 4x3 pattern. And then once we have it all laid out, we're going to take each row to the sewing machine and sew them together. There we go. And we're going to sew them together one at a time. So what I'm going to do is start by taking this top row. I'm going to sew it together along each of my seams, and then I'm going to press towards the right. Okay, I have my first 2 rows sewn together. That first one, I sewed all of the seams to the right. My second one, I sewed all the seams to the left. At this point, I think it's easier just to go ahead and sew these 2 rows together. So I'm just going to fold it over and sew along the long seam. Next, I'm going to sew that row together, ironing towards the right, and once I find my last block, I'm going to sew that last row towards the left and sew those 2 rows together. Okay, now that you have your quilt blocks all put together in a 3x4 pattern, it is time for us to start with our borders. So let's go to our pattern and let's look and see what it says. So we're on assembling the quilt. We've laid them out. Step 1. So the next step, directions number 2, it says with the border background fabric, sew the border on the top and the bottom, press toward the border, then sew the border on the sides and press toward the border. So our first border on our quilt is our stop border. It's called a stop border, but it's just background fabric. So this is the part that I didn't cut out in the first video. Sometimes I like to just measure the edge of my quilt to make sure that it comes out to the right length, and then go ahead and get my border cut at that point. So if we go back to cutting instructions, it's our second page technically. The very last one on the background fabric, it says cut 6 strips of 2.5 inch with the fabric, and you're going to make 2.5 inches by 48.5 inches. That's the top and the bottom pieces, and then you need 2 that are 68.5, one for each side. So here I have my pieces. I have the longer ones, I have the shorter ones. I'm going to take this to the sewing machine, do my top and bottom ones, sew them on the edges, iron them towards the border. It's just a lot easier because there's not a whole bunch of seams we're going to have to make sure lay flat. So I'll do the top and the bottom, and then I'm going to sew on the sides. Okay, the tip that I have for sewing on borders is once you have your borders cut and it's time to sew them on, it's best if you actually pin it into place. And the reason why you want to do that is because then you make sure that there isn't a part where it's short on one side or it doesn't quite match up. And I really like to pin my borders. Now the way I would do that is I would start by finding the center of my border and the center of my quilt top, and I will pin those 2 centers together on one side. I then put pins in along that edge, probably every 12 to 18 inches. They don't have to be too close, but what that does do is allow you to get your border centered on your quilt, then stretched and all lined up so that you're ready to sew it on. Now, the next tip I have, obviously, is ironing, ironing, ironing. If you do that after each time you sew, it's so much better because everything starts to lay flat. And then, as I go to iron, I watch for strings that are sticking out in my seams. And a lot of times they're just ones that I can pull out, and it's just a thread coming off of the side of my fabric that I cut, but every once in a while it is thread from my sewing machine. I'm not very good at trimming my strings as I sew, and so I actually will find them that they're stuck inside some of my borders or some of my pieces that I have sewn together. Okay, so now I have both of that cream color border. It's sewn in and it's all the way around my quilt top. The next thing we want to do is gather up all of our letter F pieces. And it's time to create that scrappy piano border that is on the final outside of our quilt. So if we go over there to our assembling the quilt directions, what it says is we're going to take our F pieces and sew them together along the long side. So we're going to sew them together like this. We need 2 strips for the top and the bottom that are the same length, and 2 strips that go from one side or on the 2 longer sides of our quilt. So the first one, scrappy border 1, takes 26 of these and you sew them together, and you need 2 of them that are 26, and then you need to take 38 scrappy border pieces, letter I or letter F, and you need to make 2 that have 38 pieces in them. And you can sew them together however you want. Usually I do mine in groups of 2, but just sewing them one right after another is great. You can put them in all different types. You can put, sometimes I have grays next to each other. Sometimes I have other colors next to each other. The only thing I try not to do is put the patterns next to each other. I'm not very good at scrappy, so I tried really hard to make it look scrappy. Okay, so let's go sew our strips together and get ready for that final border that we're going to put all the way around our quilt. Okay, I'm on my last border. I need to attach it at the sewing machine, and I just kind of wanted to walk you through what I meant about pinning it along your edge. So at this end, I have a seam that I want to line up, and on the other end, I have a seam. So that is where I'm going to start. I'm going to start by putting my 2 pieces over here, line up that seam, nest that seam, and if one goes in the wrong direction, I'll just hit it with my iron so that they do have a nice nesting. Okay, and then I'm going to come to the other side of my quilt and make sure that my edge is not twisted, and I'm going to line up that seam. Now this one actually goes in the opposite direction, so I'm going to hit it with my iron real quick so it goes the way it needs to be, and grab a pin and pin that one with the nesting seams without burning my fingers. Ooh, that's nice and warm. Now, the other thing that you can see is that the seams between the blocks, you can line up with the seams along this, along the border. And what's nice is that because everything is all 2.5 inches, which is the way I planned it out, the seams should all line up nicely. So if you want to make sure that you have a seam on your border, it'll line up with the middle of the star and with the edge of your quilt block. And that just gives you a reference. I just like to line that up, and forgot where my pins were for a minute. Line those up and pin it into place. And that just helps it be a little easier when I'm running it through my sewing machine. So I'm just going to go along the edge here, line up those seams, make sure that they're ready to all be sewn together. I will then sew it, bring it back to my ironing board and press it. And I'm just going to press it towards the scrappy border. It's just easier that way for me, and so it's probably easier for you to do it that direction. I wanted to give you a close-up of this real quick so you know what I'm talking about. So as you see here, here's the center of the star. We have a nice big seam, and I've lined up this seam on my border with it, okay? Over here, between the two blocks, okay, this is where I sewed the two blocks. I also lined up this seam with it and pinned it into place. And so there's just a couple of spots. This is near the end. Okay, mainly I do it on the seams of the quilt or of the quilt blocks, and I line those up, and now they're all ready to be sewn. So now the border, this piano border, is now ready to be sewn onto the quilt. I love it when I get to this part of the quilt because it's the final ironing, and then your quilt top is finished. So I've put the final border on this. I love it. I love the way it's turning out. I love the colors of it. I think I love it better than this one up here. And now I have a finished quilt top. At this point, you can decide how you want to quilt it. I am just going to rent a long arm down at my favorite quilt store. It's actually only like a block from my house. I am so blessed by that. And I can just take a couple hours. It'll probably take me only about an hour and a half to do a free motion quilt on this. I do still need to decide what kind of backing I want to put on it. But I'm excited to be at this point. Now, do you have any questions about what we went over today? About putting on your borders or sewing your quilt blocks together? Stick around because I will show you my finished quilt. Hopefully it will get done before I have to put this video out. I am excited to see yours as well. So if you are done or still in the process, make sure you tag me over on Instagram at Ashley_SunnyMade. I would love to see it. And let's get this quilted. There you have it. It's all done. It's finished. It's bound, and it's up on my wall. Look at that. I love the way this one turned out. I love the brighter colors in it. I'm definitely more of a bolder color person. So this palette is definitely more to my liking. I do like my yellow and gray one. It's just so soft and muted. This is definitely more me. Plus, it has teal in it. Aqua. I love teals and aquas. Okay, so how did yours turn out? I would love to see them. Find me on Instagram at Ashley_SunnyMade. Tag me in your post. I would love to see how it turned out. Other than that, do you have any questions? Make sure you leave them down in the comment section below, and I will come back and answer them. If you missed any of my previous videos, I did put 1, 2, and 3 in the description box, so you can go back and catch up on those, and also that download link to get this free quilt pattern. Other than that, I hope you have a great week and happy sewing.